Being an artist can be a heck of a ride, but you're not alone. On Journey of the Art, we tell inspiring stories of artists and chat with those who support us on this path. I'm your host, Lola Opatayo, writer, editor, singer, and all-round lover of words. Come with me on the journey. Before we get into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to let you know that this podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. So feel free to listen on the go or download it for later. Hello again, and welcome to Journey of the Art. In today's episode, we dissect the intersection between writing, talent development, and the publishing process. My guest is Anwuli Ojogwu, editor and co-founder of Narrative Landscape Press. Anwuli is also the executive director and co-founder of the Society for Book and Magazine Editors of Nigeria, a non-profit association providing training and resources for editorial professionals. Welcome, Anwuli.
Thank you very much.
I'm very, very happy to see you here. Very happy that you decided to come on the show.
And I feel very honored to have been invited. Thank you.
Oh, the honor is mine. The honor is mine. And I can't wait to see how our conversation goes today. You've been in publishing for a considerable amount of time, and you've seen people and trends come and go. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on today's creative writing trends and processes. So you've worked with some popular writers, including Chimamanda Adichie, Igoni Barrett, Oyinkan Braithwaite, Yejide Kilanko, Biavanga Wainaina, and a host of others. And now I know that people often talk about the place of luck in getting traditionally published and signing fantastic book deals. But I like to think that some of these writers had an it factor that stood them out. Would you agree with this? And if so, what would you say that this it factor is?
Well, I agree with you that those are remarkable writers that you just mentioned. But writing is such a democratic process. And, sometimes even the best of writers do not get discovered.
Right.
But, this year's Nobel Prize winner, and I've forgotten her name, but the title has to do with something orbits, and I remember. And I remember the way that one of the blurbs describes the book, as a book of ideas.
Right.
And I think, that is one of the things that has always distinguished a writer, because you have to find, whether or not you find your voice, whether or not you find your style, it's also about the ideas that you're putting forward. That's what distinguishes you.
Right. Right.
So with Chinua Achebe, it was, demystifying colonialism and just talking about how it had affected, and it was a big idea at the time.
Right.
With Chimamanda, she has tackled issues of feminism. She has tackled issues of the war, which, through her eyes, many people have come to understand that war. And I'm one of those people because I grew up asking questions, but because of the trauma of the war, I couldn't find anyone who was willing to answer questions.
Right.
So that the book Half of Yellowstone gave me a glimpse. And I thought, people like, Igor Barrett, who is inspired by many writers, including William Faulkner. William Faulkner's this work is described as the work of a generation. And then you find that in his work, he's tackling things like, which is in the reverse, like racism and colorism and patriotism. So I think that, being a writer as well, one of the things that I like Binge, I remember one of the things that, one of the controversies with Binge was when he turned down, and I think an award ceremony from the Queen of Jordan or something. I can't remember which. And then he wrote that controversial article in Vanity Fair called How to Write About Africa.
Yeah.
And so he was confronting the way that, Africa is addressed, Africa is looked at.
Right.
So when you see these writers, you can say to yourself, this is the one big thing I remember them for, because this is the one big thing that they have tackled. It's just part of their belief systems, and they try to put it in their writing. Now, I'm not saying that all work should be activism. There are people who are, especially young writers now, who are tackling more modern issues like, self-identity and the rest of them. But I can say that, one of the things that makes, writing quite distinguished is the question of, ideas.
Right,
That and things like that are the kind of things that Salma Rushdie, Zadie Smith, um, Diana Evans, and a whole lot of people who you just read and you're like, you step away from the book and you're like, I feel like I just have seen the world in a different way,
right,
this person has captured something that I haven't seen in a very long time,
right.
um, or has taught me something, or has sort of like predicted where the world is going to be in the next couple of years.
Hmm.
And that's, I think, is one of the things that distinguishes them, the fact that they put forward ideas.
Right. I love that. I love that a lot. The putting forth of ideas, and I'm gonna carry that in my back pocket. So thank you for sharing that. One of the places where writers experience hiccups is in their relationships with editors. And in my experience as an editor, I've learned that this is often because writers have a different expectation of the editing process and its impact on their work. So, what has been your approach in managing this? How do editors facilitate that trust between themselves and the writers?
Well, in my experience editing writers, I've tried to publish writers anyway. I've had sort of a good experience. I think, you know, for whatever reason, I think what I've done in the beginning is I sort of tried to build trust in the beginning. I always tell them that, look, my job is to advise. If I feel very strongly about something, I will tell you. If you feel very strongly about something, let's have a conversation about it. But then, let's discuss why, you are stubborn upon a certain issue and why I think that you can move forward, or you
Right.
can take that entire chapter and throw it out the book. So I try to have a conversation before I engage editors. But I understand. I mean, this is something that they have probably spent 4 years putting together, and
Yeah.
then some editor from nowhere comes to tell them that, look, what you're writing, or this particular thing you're writing doesn't, it's not gonna work. And I understand writers being precious about um what their work, but they also have to be able to learn to work with editors, because editors are an external part of the publishing process, and they come with
Right.
a third eye. So they're not coming with the love and the passion that you're coming with. They are looking at things objectively and telling you, I understand that you've written this thing and it's great, but it doesn't
It
work.
needs a little more work.
But I don't discount or dismiss. Yeah, it doesn't work. So I don't dismiss that there are writers out there who are precious, and a lot of writers who, dismiss the help of an editor, especially when helping. And it's funny. I found that writers look at editors in a very different way. They think, because I've heard manga writer who says, you know, editors are, they are because was it observers or something? There's something he calls editors.
Yeah.
And I sit there every time I hear him say that, I'm like, that's not what we are. Like, we play a major role in defining and framing a story.
Yes.
We are not sitting and reading a story and saying, oh, you know what, this one, it's no good. Because the writer, the particular person, the way he frames the work of an editor is that we're supposed to advise, and the writer's supposed to go off and decide whether or not the editor is right. But that's not our job. Our job, we play a major role in shaping people's stories, and writers can be difficult about it. But
Yes.
so far I've been lucky with the writers that I have worked with, and they take my advice, and and throw out chunks of it. Sometimes, but sometimes it works. Sometimes but it's not an easy process. That I can assure you.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to call it a dance. And sometimes I think that, sometimes you have to play a little fast music. Sometimes you have to slow down the music depending on the client you're working with or the writer you're
Exactly.
working with. So, yeah, I can totally relate to all of those
Exactly.
things. So, as I noted earlier, you are also the co founder of the Society for Book and Magazine Editors of Nigeria. Can you speak a bit about the concerns that led you to start the association?
Concerns in the sense of the challenges we're going through. Is that what you mean?
No, no, concerns in terms of what were the problems that you saw in the publishing industry in Nigeria that led you to start SBMed?
Oh, okay. So, my co-founder and I at the time are self-taught editors. But I had great bosses. When I was when I started in publishing, I started as a reader, by the way, for people who want to get into publishing and think that you just go into publishing and then you just go up, up. I started as a
Right.
reader, then an editorial assistant, and I had a very straight trajectory up the ladder. And one of the things that we observed is, we were self-taught. We had to learn how to edit things ourselves.
Yeah.
I remember in Farafina, because we had a Farafina magazine as well, a literary magazine that later became a general magazine, because I think it was way ahead of its time. And the people who subscribed were like, I don't understand all these things that you people are writing. They're just big, big words and big, big, like, so we turned it into a general magazine so that it would cover a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
But I remember that we learned how to edit from the kind of works that we wanted to emulate. So we would pick up Vanity Fair magazines and the New Yorker and Time magazine as well. And that was where we would sit and, discuss and wonder, okay, this sentence, especially for Time magazine, I can give an example. There's an obituary at the end, and I think it's just about 50 words long,
Right.
and just learning and sitting and just trying to understand, you know, why it works with that word length. You know, what has been taken out? Why is it shorter? Did they use active verbs or what did they use? Or did they use pronouns or what did they? And that is one of the ways that, we learned how to write in write short sentences and concise sentences as well. And that's, with Vanity Fair, because there's a lot of long form there as well.
Right.
And New Yorker has a lot of long form as well. So yes, we're just studying, this sentence structures and studying, reading the stories and understanding the structure of the stories and why they work. So that is how I grew up in publishing. That was the path that I took to learn how to edit. And so I realized, my co-founder and I at the time, we said to ourselves, why, make people go through this very difficult process of trying to figure out what works and what doesn't? Why don't we try and help them by
Right.
creating a platform,
Right.
to put them through a proper path, that they can, learn these things. Because I said to myself, I saw, in the UK at the time was called the Society for Proofreaders and Editors before it became chartered, a royal chartered organization institution. And so I saw that many people have societies, and then like, why don't we have a society too for editors
Right.
and proofreaders, and any other person who is an editorial professional in whatever way. So the reason why we started it was because, there was really no pathway to learning how to be an editor. You have to teach yourself, and it can be a very
Right.
difficult process because sometimes, you don't know. To be, I mean, you can testify as in learning how
Yeah.
to be an editor is a process.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't even know whether you're getting it right. So we said, okay, it'd be great to set up something to help younger people who want to learn and don't have to teach themselves to become editors. So that's
Mm.
the reason, that's the gap that we saw, and that's why the reason why we set it up.
Right. That's awesome. And what are some of the challenges that you faced so far?
So, standardization. So, I find that in Nigeria, unlike in the UK and the West, a lot of things are tied to, professionalism.
Right.
So people will trust you more if you were part of something.
Right.
Take acting, for example, in America. If you weren't part of the union, you can't act. You know, there's a criteria, or how do I put it, that you have to meet before you
Yeah.
are able to, do something. But in Nigeria, those things really don't matter. You can get a job as an editor if you learn how to be an editor on Wattpad. I have met one or two people who have, learn how to edit on Wattpad.
Yeah.
But there's no need, there's no necessity to be part of something, to standardize your skill sets and to,
Right.
to enable that the whoever's employing you can trust that you've gone through a process and you've learned something. So it really doesn't matter. So I still find that a lot of young people are still trying to learn how to edit by themselves. A lot of people call themselves editors these days.
Hmm.
Um, well, if I can see some good material on the internet and as well as some bad ones as well. So they are learning it some way somehow. But I find that, you know, Nigeria does not insist that you go through a
Right.
proper professional body before get them, like you are in Canada, you're part of, the Society of Editors in Canada. If I lived, in the UK, I would join CIEP because it
Yeah.
would boost my reputation and help me get work.
Yeah.
Um, but I find that, just being able to do that here, it really doesn't matter because an employer will and a lot of people do not even understand just don't understand the process of editing or the necessity of editors and don't even recognize that editors is a professional career.
Right. Yeah.
Because everything writing overshadows a lot of things. So when they
Yeah.
say, "Oh, you're a writer," okay, you edit it, okay, that's fine. That's okay.
What exactly does
So
that
that's
mean? Yeah.
but we're trying to educate as well. But that's what we find
Yeah.
still. It's a process, but we're trying our best.
Yeah, I like what you said about educating because I know that one of the things that SB Men does, that's the short form of the society, is that you host teaching conferences and workshops and a host of events. And I know that one of the events that you had was one of the events you had invited Margaret Busby. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Oh, that was amazing. It was, I just, it was amazing to just have her in our presence. It's funny because she said, I don't have time. I can only spend 10 minutes with you. I literally had to beg. I had to say the time was up because it was so exciting just listening to her.
Right.
We had this Pan-African it was a slash workshop slash conference and we had participants from uh, around the world because we had someone from Australia, we had somebody from Kenya, we had somebody from East Africa, we had somebody from North Africa, we had somebody. So it was really exciting to have people from around the world. And Margaret Busby she was one of the facilitators of the program,
Yeah.
and she just came and she just, her entire experience is a lesson.
Mm.
Just the things that she shared. Like I picked up things as an editor, on her path to, and then the groundbreaking things that she has done. The woman is phenomenal. So it was really wonderful to have Margaret Busby on one of our programs. It was,
Yeah.
but we tried to get some, more interesting. At the time was it 2020, the Booker Prize chair at the time, and I forget his name, was supposed to be a participant, but because of COVID broke out and he couldn't make it.
Yeah.
But we've had some very wonderful, we've invited people from the London Review of Books as well. And these are not, I mean, I can say that it was a 2020 and it didn't happen, but we had to cancel everything because but they saw what we were doing and they were
Right.
happy to participate. So it was really fantastic. My Michael Busby could make it. Was amazing. It was.
Okay.
Look at me. After how many years, I'm still excited. Yeah.
Yeah, I was excited as well when the whole thing happened. And I think I'm just constantly in awe of what you're doing with the society and raising a new generation of editors who can then pass on the torch to others as well. So amazing work. And this leads me to a question on your work on A Mind to Silence and Other Stories, which is an anthology of the Caine Prize for African Writing 2021-2022. Can you share a bit about the editing process and some of the lessons that you learned from accomplishing the project?
It was an amazing project that, I was very honored to have been selected as the editor in residence for the retreats for the writers, who are remarkable, by the way. Um, One of the things I had done previously to the time, that I was the editor was, I had already when it comes to original work, it has always just been one big bundle. Like it has always come as a long novel or a novella.
Right.
But it's never come in very many shorts, 20 short stories,
Right.
all original work. I had the writer in residence was Joel Ile. Brilliant, amazing writer, by the way. And we found that, because Jaws, every time we met, one of the assignments of the writers is that they had to produce original work at the retreats.
Right.
And producing original work at a retreat is not an easy thing because you have like a 10-day window to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
So we found that our role, was way more than you know, just teaching, because, George did that as well. He did most of the teaching. Our role as well was to listen to the ideas and shape and frame them and tell them, this works and this doesn't work.
Right.
This is too long, and this would make a very great long story, but not a short story. This is not, so we had to do that. So, like I said, before that experience, I have been always had been used to just, getting long form manuscripts and maybe novellas and dealing with one
Right.
idea.
Right.
But I found that I had to deal with 20 ideas. So my role, most of the time, and I found it exhilarating because, I would I found myself sitting down with the writers and we would discuss, what it is that they were trying to birth, and I would try to listen, and they would do drafts, and I would give feedback and say, I think this work was not there yet. I think this is great, but it's not, oh, I think you're on a track, but halfway this, like you've lost momentum and it's flat.
Right.
And so Joe and I did that for 20 stories.
Wow.
Um, but when they had written the story, Joe's job was done. Joe could go. And then it was left to me to now begin to, go through the stories and, edit them. And so, like I said again, working with a manuscript, I can do it one writer and go back and forth. But I had to go through 20 writers and do a lot of back and forth, because I like to interact, and I like to be sure that, we are on the same page concerning, what we're working on.
Right.
It was a lot of hard work and sleepless nights, that I can assure you. During the retreat, I think I would wake up at maybe 6 and I wouldn't go to bed until like 10
Wow.
because, I would tell myself, you know what, this one story is just 3,000 words. I'm going to be done in like 2 hours. I know,
Never.
like 4 or 5 hours later, I'm still on that one story because I'm staring at the paragraph and I'm like, this doesn't work. Why? I'm trying to figure out why it doesn't work
Right.
and how I
Right.
can improve it and tell the writer it doesn't work.
Right.
But it was exhilarating, especially, and then, to have the final product and to put it all together, finally. It took me eight to about 8 weeks or so to do that. And then submit it to the publisher, that was Cassava Republic, to do that. But it was an amazing experience, and the writers were fantastic.
Yeah.
Young, emerging, talented writers.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of work. I didn't even know the intricacies of
You felt,
of the work, but you did an amazing job.
oh God.
And how would you
Thought I was
say
gonna cry at one point in time.
how would you say that the writers responded to your feedback? Was that something that you had to struggle with, or was that a smoother process than you would have imagined?
At all. They were very gracious. They were all of them. And I must say that, they were very kind because they had very kind things to say about working with me as well. Because one of the things that they said was important is that I listened,
Hmm.
you know, and I did not impose. And I think that was very important to them that I listened. So I did do a lot of listening. I try to get them involved in the process, which is important for me. And I think they appreciated
Yeah.
that, you know. So I didn't have a difficult time working with any of them. at all.
That's
It was an
amazing.
amazing
That is
process.
amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk a little bit about talent development while we're on the subject of working with writers, specifically as it relates to the writing submissions that you receive at Narrative Landscape Press. What skill gaps do you see, and what suggestions do you have for closing
That's the reason why they call it a slush pile.
them? Yeah, you get the best of the best, the worst of the worst.
Yeah. You know, it's not every time that you find the best of the best in a slush pile. It's
Yeah,
people
yeah,
it's people who want to become writers,
right,
and I haven't found their voices. And I would say this
right.
for at least 90% of the people who submit work.
That is a
Yes.
significant number.
It's
Wow.
called a slush file. When I was a reader in Farafina, I remember that I used to read a lot of novels, a lot of work, manuscripts, and I had to send out the rejections, by the way.
Oh
After reading them, I used to get a lot of hate mail.
no.
I used to get a lot of hate mail. But I think we were kind in Farafina, because what we would do, which is some of the things that we apply in Irish Landscape Press, is that we would outrightly reject the ones that we didn't think worked at all.
Right.
And then for the ones that have promise, we would actually give a proper review and say this is what we think about this work. And if you
Yeah.
would just focus and do a few things, and I think you probably will. Um, but I think there's so many people who want to be writers, so many people, and you know writing is a process.
Right.
There is the actual writing, there's the finding your voice, there's finding your expressions, and putting your ideas, defining yourself. And so you find a lot of times that the people who submit work in the slush pile haven't really found their voices yet.
Mm.
But it doesn't mean that they won't. But I think that they're excited by the fact that they've written something, and they want to put it out in the world to say that but I don't think we're short of talent. I don't think we are. I think that there are many people who are looking to be, and many of them will, uh, or maybe few of them will. Yeah, writing is, a few of them will. But there's a lot of talent. But just a lot of times when we get submissions, we just find writing of people who haven't yet found their voices.
Right.
So you find them if sometimes, and some of the signs are that, you find them um, mimicking other writers,
Right.
which is not a bad thing. Which is not a bad thing. Because I mean, that is also part of the process of writing, is that you admire someone, you do what the person does until you find your own voice. But you find that it's a full mimicking. Like I don't know how else to express it.
Right.
Like you find someone who wants to do like a reenaction of things fall apart, and like you know, don't do that.
No, don't do that.
Rather than being called a Okonkwo, he's called maybe Chidinma or something. It's just a same setting, epic setting. There's a tree,
Right.
there's a palm tree, there's a white guy. So you find those sort of things. But we're not sure. I don't think I think it's just, if you tell everyone, if you want to be a writer, just focus on building your craft, and working every day and working very hard at it. And,
Right.
you know, you'll get this someday.
Right. Right.
I hope
I like.
I answered your question.
Yes, you did. You did.
Okay.
You did, and I agree with you, about people not finding their voice and how that can, I guess, keep them in a loop, because you are trying to be somebody else and you haven't stopped to say, who am I and what ideas do I want to put forth? So, yeah, I totally see how that can be the case. So, we're still on topic of Nigerian storytelling. And with more Nigerians in the diaspora due to mass immigration, what differences do you see between the stories told by Nigerians at home and Nigerians abroad?
Well, so there's a slight difference. You can, I mean, they're Nigerians. So you find, stories. They are trying to tell stories of their new homeland. So there's a,
Right,
there are stories of, of identity. There's a lot of stories about identity,
right,
living in a strange land, and yet, you know, talking about, there's always a cultural factor. You
right,
know,
right,
who they are as, as people, as against where they are now. um, the things that they have brought from, their homeland and living and being those kind of people there.
right,
So there are many stories that are focused on identity and, sometimes the difficulties of being displaced and living in a new homeland and looking for opportunities, or even talking, but there's always a connection between where they are now and and their homeland. There's always a connection, what I've
right,
observed. um and I'll give an example, not just literary fiction, even we have amazing pulp fiction coming out of the diaspora now, beautiful amazing pulp fiction coming out now. And I would give an example of Wahala by Nikki May. Nikki May is, we describe, people like her as half caste in Nigeria. People, other places will say she's multiracial. Was it
yeah.
multiracial? Multiracial.
Mixed race of mixed
Mixed
races.
race. Sorry, mixed race. Yes. And so one of the things she said is that she's never find stories of people like herself, mixed
Right,
race children. And she tackles that, but she's very connected to her origins, even though she grew up in the UK. But she's very connected to, and so when you read Wahala, even though it's set in the UK, and it is about four friends who are half Nigerian, by the way, all of them. One of the most significant things that you find in the book is food. A lot of Nigerian
right,
food. There's moi moi,
right,
there's yam, there's jollof rice. Like so even if it was never set in Nigeria, there's that
right,
element of Nigeria in it.
right, right,
Another story would be Lizzie Blackburn, Damilola Blackburn, Yinka West, my husband, which is hilarious. It's so again, it's set in the UK, but it is so relatable because, she's a first generation, um, child that has grown up overseas, and her parents are, are Nigerians, and they,
right,
have just uprooted themselves and gone to live somewhere else, but they have taken all their biases and everything else, and they are imposing it on this child who is growing up in a different society.
yeah,
But it doesn't matter, so you feel the pressure of her trying to fit into, her cultural rules.
yeah,
At 25 you should be married. Why is your sister married, before you? And it's funny, but it is not set in Nigeria. It's all set in the UK. But it is so relatable because you always have that cultural norms, and bringing, our culture and, reflecting it in the stories. So we see a lot of that, and I think it's great. I think it's wonderful, because it just means that they haven't lost touch with where they come from. And even those who have lived overseas for a very long time just means that they're in touch with, where, and those who have left, are exploring the stories that now matter to them, but not forgetting their homeland, which I think works perfectly. And
right,
you have audiences who are very happy right now to be reading such stories.
right, right. Um, I like what you said about stories of identity, because I mean, as a Nigerian who lives abroad, I do understand the preoccupation with this theme of identity. What would you say is the theme that Nigerians at home are raving about right now?
In terms of stories,
Yes.
um, what are they writing about? That's a very good question. So one is, writing has gotten more experimental. You have a lot of young people who are exploring speculative fiction,
Yeah.
and the rest of them. Um, even horror. You have people who are also exploring horror, but I think it's still centered on, centered, on our society.
Right.
But the ways that they are going about it now is very experimental, and they're really doing a great job of it. Like we have this one story by Mazi Onwunu called this How to Build a Space Masquerade. Now, How to Build a Space Masquerade. Before I worked with him because I worked with him to edit the book. I didn't like speculative fiction. Those are the two things I said I would never edit: children's book, children's fiction, and anything sci-fi. I would never touch because I didn't understand it. But
Right.
I found, his writing so accessible, and at the same time, it was mind blowing that it was speculative fiction because it felt so normal. So he was definitely exploring Igbo cosmology. I think that's the word. So, so he's talking about Igbo rights,
Yeah.
but they are flying cars and they are, all the elements of speculative fiction. Definitely, it is set in a dystopian land, like there's a
Yeah.
nameless land, but at the same time, you can relate to the Igbo initiation process that he's talking about. You can relate to there's a part where there's a part of Igbo culture where when someone is going home and someone is dead, you probably will sing to make sure the person travels well in that case. So you find a story about a person who is in space but refused to return to Earth, and they have to actually carry out this rites, but the person is in space, and all the rights. So it was just beautifully explored and at the same time set in a dystopian world. So we find that. So you find a lot of experimental writing now. People are writing beautifully, centered on society, but just taking chances on different kinds of genres on in the country.
Yeah, I like that. And I have seen that as well. I've seen that leaning toward more experimental writing, which is why I also don't think that African writing should be caged in a box because it's
Yeah,
constantly evolving, it's changing. As the people are changing, the writing is changing. So
yes,
that is a wonderful observation. So Emily, not
yes.
everyone is going to go the traditional route because we have a variety of digital tools and resources and artificial intelligence giving more power to writers to put out their work. So, what are some tips you can share with writers looking to self publish?
Hmm, that's a very good question. So, so self-publishing. So one of the things that I know that self-publishing, I may be wrong, but that has always been my impression. It doesn't go through the rigor of traditional publishing and the things that we do. Um, but one of the things one of the advantages these days of, people who self-publish is that they are very present and they promote their work really well. So it's, they get people to
Right,
see what they have done. My advice would come from a writing and editorial perspective. I
right,
would say that, a lot of some, I would not say a lot, some self-published, writers, um, who don't understand, again, the rigors of traditional publishing, may produce work and think that the work is finished.
right,
So I would advise that they use a lot of peer groups, or they used to use their peers and hire editors to do, especially when they've done. Number one, they shouldn't, when you write a first draft, they shouldn't assume that their writing is complete.
right,
They should, just keep it away for a while, come back to it. It doesn't have to be literature.
right,
It can be utility writing advice or monographs or you name it. But they should use, they should utilize um writing groups, utilize their peers, and utilize editors, to as third eyes to look through what it is that they have done and take advice to
right,
produce good work. And it's not just for that work, it's also to just show you where your deficiencies are, as a writer. as well. So you can have someone tell you, you are, you're using too many adverbs and this is so lazy. The way that you are everywhere is quickly, runningly, coincidentally, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you should use more active verbs,
Right.
to maybe describe, okay, maybe let's even use a book of utility. Maybe you're writing 5 ways to make a wig. 5 ways to make a wig. So you can have someone, and maybe it's just you go straight to the instructions. You can have someone tell you, if you put scenarios in there, maybe put some little storytelling, you probably will get people's attention better.
Mm,
Or if you maybe at the end of it, maybe you put some exercises to engage their minds, or you just put some questions there and treat some things, it would be good. So it always helps to have, other people, external people to look at. And they shouldn't be in a hurry to put a book out there. A
right.
book is forever. It's forever. So when you're going to put something out there, you know, it is no longer yours, as I was taught in school. It now belongs to the public, and the public will judge it. So
Right.
no matter what you think is fantastic, and your small and your father and your mother think it's fantastic, and your siblings think it's fantastic, the public
Right.
will judge and tell you, what they really think about it. And I think it's great that we have platforms for them to, publish. If they can't go through the traditional platform, you have Amazon, KPD. You have Kindle that you can publish as well. You have Ingram, I think, as well. And there are other digital platforms now that you can publish your work and, put your book out in the world. But I would just emphasize that when they are birthing the idea of what it is that they want to do, they should just put some efforts
Right.
and taking care before, they put it out there.
Right. Right. That's great advice. Because yes, writers are often in a hurry to put it out there, and they boycott that process of feedback and revisions. So yes, that's a great advice. So before I let you go, what are some publications that are on the horizon at Narrative Landscape Press? What's coming in
Oh,
2025, 2026?
I am so excited. So we have even though it was published this year, but the Nigerian edition is coming out, going to get released next year. Uche Okonkwo's collection of short stories. One of the stories was nominated for the King, was shortlisted for the King. So we have a kind of madness coming out next year. We have Housewoman as well, a beautiful, horrific, horrific story. Just thinking about it gives me goosebumps. It just talks about the misconceptions of living overseas and how people get
Mm,
trapped, into false narratives or promises and they move overseas. So it's called The Housewoman. It's a horrific story, but it's beautifully written by a writer called Adora. I forgot her last name. We also have the great one and only Chimamanda Adichie coming out with her novel after 12 years called Dream
yes, I can't
Count.
wait to
We're very
read that.
excited. Oh, yes, we are. We're very excited about that. We have, a romance novel coming out called Lagos Love and Complications as well by a young, upcoming writer, tackling the issues of Lagos love in Lagos. Let me see. What else do we have? We have many, but I just can't remember because of my head is racing.
Yeah,
But we have. Let me see. We I would stop there because those are the only they are there, but I just can't remember the list. But I know that
that's okay.
those are the three novels, and we're publishing a lot of women, which makes me very proud. So I love
Yes,
that.
yes, amazing, amazing. Well, thank you, Anwuli. Thank you so
Oh, after
much
yes,
for.
so we're also publishing Igoni Barrett's White Faith, which is the sequel to Black Ass. So
Oh,
yes, so we're going to be releasing that next year as well, and as well as another edition of Black Ass as well. Yeah,
oh,
so
that
we're going to be
sounds
doing
very
that.
interesting.
I told you I couldn't remember
Okay.
everything, but I now remember.
And you probably remember more right after this calling. You'd be like, oh,
I
I wish I
know.
said that.
Oh, I should have said that. Oh, God.
Thank you so much for coming to chat with me today. I learned so much from you. Thank you for taking the
Thank you for
time.
having me, Lola. It
You're
was
welcome.
wonderful, wonderful being on your platform. I think you're doing amazing, amazing work with your podcast. You know,
Thank you.
thank you for your contributions to the arts.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You made my day. Thank you. On the next episode, I'll be chatting with another inspiring artist. But before then, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me what you think about this show and this episode. Feel free to drop me a note here or send me a DM on Instagram at Journey of the Art Pod. Finally, please subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or follow and rate the show if you're listening elsewhere. Help me connect with other artists who need a dose of inspiration today. Until next time, stay on the journey of your art.